So, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We are covering a wide range of time zones as we get together for another poetry reading session for the Hearth Within. And this time we decided to call it Warp and Weft, a story to tell, because we believe that most poems are trying to record a story, whether it is a story of a moment, whether it is a story of a loss or a longing or a love or a desire or a nostalgia. It is the story that probably animates the heart of the poem. So we are very, very grateful that all of you consented to join us for this session. It would not have been possible without you. And to formally welcome everybody, I would request Professor Jaideep Sarangi to do the honors. Over to you, Jaideep, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a privilege to be here in this platform. And telling a story, I think, is the hallmark of any narration, any part of narration, or anything that goes in the making of the art. And the art is always a speaking picture. And for poetry, it matters a lot. And everyone, I think, there is a story before we start writing something in pen and paper. And what a wonderful experience it is to host Anita, Franklin, Kerry, Lakshmi, Sanjukta, and Sukrita from different backgrounds and different time zones for the cause of poetry. We were talking, myself and Bashudhara and I, we were talking about how poetry can uplift the soul of living. Anita is coming up with a beautiful compilation of poetry. I'll say anthology of poetry that is Soul Spaces. And what an amazing work, I think. Many of us are the contributors to that. And the idea of poetry, I think, is like the narration that goes into the making of poetry. So today's evening, today's morning and afternoon in different time zone is how poetry is prompted by different modes of thinking to tell a story or aesthetic, to have a full range of aesthetic delight. With all these, may I invite today's first reader of poetry, who needs no introduction, Franklin Abbott, a poet, psychotherapist, activist, and the member of the Radical Fairies. He is the author of two collections of poetry and a CD of original music and poetry. Music and poetry. What a beautiful thing it is. He has so many things to his credit, so many awards and poetry anthologies, and his latest collection of poems, My Ordinary Life, is on the way. So over to the author of My Ordinary Life, because our lives are ordinary. You will turn them extraordinary. Over to Abbott, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It is just a joy to be here today. I have been wanting to get back to India since I was there in 2019 before the pandemic. And of course, travel has not been possible in the body, but I feel like I am there in spirit, and it feeds me. It feeds me. My new book, My Ordinary Life, which hopefully will be out in a few months, I'm calling the book Story Poems, because the poems are all stories, and they're stories pretty much from the time that the pandemic began until the present. It takes me through my various vaccinations, and also during this time, like a lot of people, I lost people. My losses were not directly due to COVID. Each of the people that I lost who was important to me died of something else, but COVID was a cofactor in the sense that they could not get proper medical attention quickly enough. They could not get personal support quickly enough. And so, we've been impacted in many, many ways by being closed into our lives. And for me, it's been a way to slow down and take a look at things. So let me share a couple of my story poems. The first one is about my dad. My mother died. COVID began in, say, February, and she died that August. And my dad is now 95, and so he's quite frail. And I don't live in the same city with him, but I go periodically and do dad duty to relieve my brother and the caregiver. And it's interesting. It's always interesting. This poem is called He Did Not Fall. I felt like I was holding something fragile, precious, liquid, flammable. Each step had to be deliberate. Each toe in place, the arch and energy of each foot aligned with bone and tendon, the sway of my hips, the point of balance 3 fingers below the navel, all a perfect pivot. I had on white gloves, not real ones, but my hands were clean and my fingers nimbled as I sorted through old photographs, little cards from a wedding long past, a yellowed will, an old death certificate, when all were sorted and saved and unsaved. My father, who was standing above, looking down, hands clutching his walker, grew tearful. Catching each breath, a net for his tears, he said he hadn't been ready to say farewell this time last year when my mother died. Nancy, my brother's wife, said, "We all miss Mimi." And my brother told him it was okay. And I held this fragile swan made of air and fire and water, and it did not shatter. Every night of my visit, I slept in the bed my mother died in, on the side of the bed where she lay, where she breathed her last breath. I could hear my father up and down all night. He can't evacuate his bladder. He can't ever have rest. I hear the flush, and again the flush. In the morning, I am up and he is ready. He is reading the paper, drinking his coffee, doing Sudoku, and I am far from rested, alert to his breath and movements. It is as if I can't divert attention lest he slip. I can only use half of me lest he fall. I make it through my tour of duty, careful to a tremble, and when I pack the car and tell him I love him, I mean it. He echoes back and stands to watch me leave. Hours later, after I call him and tell him I have driven the 5 hours from Nashville to Atlanta, he falls. He hurts himself, tears flesh, but does not break bone. My brother comes and takes him for emergency care, texts me pictures of his wounds. This morning I call my father. He answers, yes, he says, yes, he fell. One foot went back before it should, and that he is okay. If there was a God I believed in, I would pray, oh, Heavenly Father. Destiny is anything that happened 10 minutes ago. Anything that will happen 10 minutes ago is God's will. I don't know what God will do or what he, she, they won't. But I know for 10 days I balanced fate in my hands. I did not falter. I did not stumble. I did not drop. He did not fall. So a lot of what I write about, like I said before, is human vulnerability, because I'm older. I'm 71 now, and in some of the gerontological literature, they say 71 is the official age where you're old. And I believe it because certain parts are not working as well, and there's not an easy fix for it. I used to know why I hurt, and now it's somewhat mysterious to me. The aches and pains, they come and go. This is called vulnerability. I was in a writing group I was the only guy. There were 6 of us, and the writing group ended oh, I'm guessing 10 or 12 years ago. We were together for a decade, and it was a very unlikely group of people. We all wrote in different genres, and I benefited greatly from that, though I wondered if I would when I started. I sort of started out of obligation and kept going because it was delightful. This is called vulnerability. I am sitting with four of my closest women friends. In my friend Raylynn's kitchen, we are eating strawberries and pineapple and vegetable crudités and putting hummus on gluten-free crackers. The table is arrayed with pottery from LaDonna, a gift from her and her potter lawyer husband, and we are all talking about pain. Now, in the US, when you go to the doctor, they will ask you about your pain, and they'll say, is it 1 to 10? 1 is low, 10 is you're hollering, okay? If I could guess, I was a 2, and Jill was a 3, and LaDonna was a 6, and Emily and Raylynn each a 7. We all explained and empathized. We talked about trauma and pain, the parts that hurt, healing and how we heal, and alluded to the fear age will eclipse healing. We ate fruit and nuts, and at the end, we ate a gluten-free chocolate torte that tasted like a candy bar and sang happy birthday to each other. We talked about the 2 of us who were missing. Pat and Barb died much too young. When COVID had us all locked down, Pat in her 60s, Barb in her early 70s, gone too soon, like drowning victims whose hands we could not hold, whose lives we could not save, who we lost in the currents that might have taken us to. Jill said softly, maybe it was them who let go. Maybe it was their turn. Maybe it was something we could not fathom. Maybe I will be the next, or you will be the next. Let's see here. But next will proceed another next until there is a last. Emily had brought a box of trinkets from Pat's office. I selected a stone orb and a metal bird that will house a candle. I took half a dozen pieces of the pottery LaDonna gave us, mugs and tiny vases secured in a box of colored tissues. Emily drove me home in her little yellow car down the Stone Mountain Freeway. She said she was driving like a race car driver, but I was unafraid. She has the skill. And I was full of gluten-free chocolate torte with a box of ceramics and tchotchkes in the back seat and had no fear. We are all headed in the same direction. Some of us will get there first, and some of us will be later than sooner. But I know in the end, there will be cake and strawberries and stories about what happened, and we will laugh and sigh and hold our breaths until the last of us finishes the race and joins the rest of us in a party that will never end. And one more short one. I want to respect our time. This is my friends get to star in lots of my poems these days. You know, they are the stars of my life. And this is the person I refer to in this poem. I want to mention her by full name because she is a noted Indian writer. Her name is Kamla Dutt, and she has a new book out of poetry published in India, as well as a new book of short stories published in Hindi. She was, for a long time, a fairly prolific writer of short stories in Hindi, and she's well anthologized there. And she is, my neighbor. She's right around the corner from me, and we hang out a lot. And I visited with her and her family on my last visit to India in Delhi. This is called We Couldn't Escape the Joy. We had a lovely dinner, neither of us could finish, and drove home with the other half in a cardboard box. We were talking about friends, expressing concerns, and our conversation turned to cults. We are both unsuitable for cults. We are square pegs in the round holes of cults. And suddenly we saw in the sky above a double rainbow, and gasped and sighed and said no more of cults, but drank in the beauty. The rainbow shifted. They should have been left, but over the next hillock they were right. We couldn't track them. They were always opposite. They seemed to disappear, only to grow stronger, and we laughed at this unexpected blessing. Kamla had been beset by worries, and I had too. We are both growing older, and uncertainty is in our shadow. What is around the corner, a common lament, and this time one of our questions were answered. Rainbows, rainbows, radiant rainbows. We couldn't escape the joy. Thank you so much for listening. My pleasure to be here. Looking forward to hearing each of you. Thank you.
You made things extraordinary. So it's not ordinary. It's extraordinary. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And we move on to our own Sukrita Paul Kumar, former fellow of IIS Shimla, held prestigious Arun Ashapali Chair at New Delhi University, honorary faculty in Corfu, Greece, and many distinguished positions, an honorary fellow of HK Belfast University, Hong Kong. She has published many books of translations and poetry collections. Currently, she is the series co-editor of Writing Context, volume being published by Routledge, UK and South Asia. Over to Sukrita. Thank you so much for honoring us.
Sukrita ma'am, you are muted. You have to unmute. At the bottom, there is a button.
Yeah. So this is a bit different from Zoom.
Yes.
Yeah. So I said it so graciously. I was thanking you and it all went mute. But thank you so much for this opportunity, because I think it's lovely to be together with you all and get to know what are the stories, not behind, but right out there in each poem. I think the poem tells a story, definitely. But this telling of the story, in the telling of the story, it also transforms itself. The story gets transformed. The way you might receive it, any reader might receive it, or the poet herself receives it differently eventually. So the stories keep changing. There is a dynamism about it, which I love. And I was just looking at one of my very, very old collections, which is called Without Margins. And I have a series of poems there, which came out of my experiences of working with homeless people. And many a times I felt, and the story really, the crux, the essence of the story here is that what I actually experienced was that, the older people who were in the shelter that we had created, a couple of us got together and created a shelter for about 400 homeless people. And we were going every day to work towards various things that get affected. And it was always in the night, because in the daytime they would be working. And it was in the night that we also had some camps organized for them. There were health camps, and there were also literacy camps, etc. And so we were trying to teach them how to read and write, which of course seemed such an elitist thing out there, to teach how to learn how to read and write. Anyway, there was this young boy, he was about 11 years old. And so this particular little poem, it's a very small poem, and I have a series, as I said, but I'll read just this one from here, because I've always felt that this particular boy's eyes, I would say the lack of the twinkle in the eye was very touching. And when the twinkle would happen, then that was, one wanted to hold him on to that, one wanted the twinkle to be there forever. Anyway, so this is the poem. Sabji, said the boy from Budayu. Budayu is the name of a place. Sabji, said the boy from Budayu, teach me to write a letter that my old ma can read. She never went to school, Sabji. And remember, I won't learn to write what she can't read. So, I mean, this is something that really touched me, and I have no role to play here. This is exactly what he told me in his own little Hindi. And it becomes a poem for us, but it's so harsh a reality for a child. And it just hits me every time I read it. And so I go over to the next one, which actually came out of my visit to China. And this has been published in my book called Dreamcatcher. And I call it The Woman with a Baby. Lilacs and tulips. Am I wearing the wrong spectacles? Sorry. The woman with a baby. Lilacs and tulips sprouting from the slants of her eyes. Her yellow face shimmering in white sunlight. Her body a luminescent garden. Life within life dancing on feather feet. The rising belly a tight sponge puffed into lightness. Her hands going in circles, caressing the baby inside, on the cozy pathway, whispering history in Portuguese. Lingering pasts in the ruins of the fortress in Macau. Pasts hanging with roots from old branches of banyan trees. Whiffs of future blowing from the citadel of the present. Singing the song of her body, the woman walked through smoke and dust. Our eyes met. Chinese with Indian, entwined in maternity, not mediated by English. Tiny movements rising in our bellies, fish churning in the ocean, birds flapping wings through the skies, and eyelids drooping and batting heavy to enter or exit the bliss of sleep, or is it wakefulness? Thank you. Maybe I should read one more from here, from this book, which is called Walking in Jahanpana. Jahanpana is the name of a city forest here where I go for my morning walks. Following the scent of the forest and the trailing, whistling wind that blows through crisp, crunchy leaves, I reach paths with no destinations and submit to the continuities of morning rays. I move on, guided by mirages, real and vibrant, not untruths, nor hallucinations. With the crimson sun and the silver moon filling my eyes, I do not see slithering reptiles, nor the scowling devils on the hanging branches above or the bushes below. My soul lifts me into the abstraction of the skies, above the clouds, till I cross all borders, and life meets death. And I meet myself. I find myself couched in my grandmother's lap, with my eyes, my ears, mouth stretching wide open as she starts yet again. Once upon a time. I think I should read this one because many of us are academics, and this I wrote while a seminar was going on, right? And I was in the thick of the seminar and in the theater of the absurd, as it were, right? So I call it meta cacophony. This is a seminar for you, please. Words are weapons, hurled to hurt, to cause pain, even to kill over and over again. The pause in the language of violence is just long enough for the blood to congeal in the wounds. Words dig into human psyche, manipulate the mind, turn it upside down, to surface once again as innocent babes, the hypocrites. But words are also healing. They plug the holes in the injuries, become firefighters, salvage the battered soul that rises from the ashes like a phoenix born anew. Words are ignited embers that send sparks into the dark passages of the heart, illuminate the small cave in the center or in the corner where resides the angel with a million hearts, the one who releases tears and then cheer into the world. Words are pink blossoms maturing into deep red cherries, savored by poets who lend flesh and blood to frozen thoughts and breathe life into the carcass of emotion. Words are winged tools of communication, flying and merging into the black hole of silence deep in the center of our galaxy. So I was just concerned about the words in that seminar and how they are being thrown around, and there could also be healing perhaps. So that's the story of a seminar. You just tell me, Vasudhara, how much time do I have? Do I have time for another poem?
Yes,
One
please.
more, please.
Right, okay. So this is, good that I'm reading this because I not only love the poem, I love it myself, but it's the chinar behind it whom I love. And I've often felt that I almost feel like that chinar, which is permanently there in my visual memory, because this chinar is actually, Sanjukta, you would know, in the IIAs behind that beautiful building, there are two chinars, in the Indian Institute of Advanced Study. And this, but one particular chinar, not the other one particular one, I actually feel as though, shall I say, I'm wedded and therefore, not formally, institutionally married, and therefore it's a happy marriage, right? That can be happy only because it's not institutionalized. So now after 10 years, I've just recently been to that chinar again and felt the same emotion, which was so lovely. But I have been with this chinar for the last nearly 3 decades at least. I keep visiting that chinar. O chinar, in some autumn, in some century in the past, when your leaves abandoned you, when all your colors merged into the white of mountain snow, you and I had got together. Winter after winter did we travel, seeds, saplings, roots, through strands of time, strips of desert lands, from Kashmir of peace and of strife, even through savanna grasslands of my own Africa. On the move, homeland to homeland, till we spread and reached the paintings on the walls of Ajanta. In this life, when we were born anew, partition after partition, we remained in exile. In Africa, we met Hush, their majesties, the lions, their golden manes gathering near the pond, Jambo Rafiki. They roar in one voice, sounds rolling into the lap of Mount Kenya, chilled in its white, elegant cap. O Chinar, you change colors, shed your leaves again, yet again, to be ready for life after life, death after death. Thank you. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you for those wonderful poems. And that last poem reminded me of the old man and the sea and the dream of lions that the old man repeatedly saw on the beach. So it was very beautiful. It reminded me of another story. So story leads to, as you said, another story. And thank you. That was very, very beautiful. And from here, we move over to Sanjukta Dasgupta. Dr. Sanjukta Dasgupta, professor and former head Department of English, former Dean, Faculty of Arts, Calcutta University, is a poet, critic, and translator. She is a member of the General Council of the Sahitya Akademi, New Delhi, and the convener of the English Advisory Board, Sahitya Akademi. President of the Intercultural Poetry and Performance Library, Kolkata, her recent awards include the IWS FF Women Achievers Award and the WEI Kamla Das Poetry Award. Professor Dasgupta has published over 23 books. Her published books of poetry are Snapshots, Dilemma, First Language, More Light, Lakshmi Unbound, Sita Sisters, and very recently a collection of her poems, new and selected poems, has been brought out by Professors Jaideep Sarangi and Sangeeta Sanyal. We are very, very grateful that Professor Sanjukta Dasgupta is here with us, and we look forward to some very powerful stories emerging from her poems. Over to you.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Wonderful to meet the entire world on this one platform, all of us peeping through windows of absolutely a precise size in terms of there is no variability in those little windows through which we are peeping at each other. And it's a wonderful moment when poets meet each other, because it's a meeting not only of identities and faces, but it's a meeting of minds and also about creativity. And we are really celebrating creativity. And in this case, of course, about storytelling. And storytelling began from the myths and the epics to the present, even stories in blogs, in whatever form we are trying to tell a story. In my case, my stories, in terms of the poetry I write, some of the poems which I write is more about substance than style, where it's more a sort of awareness campaign. That is poetry for change. And those are poems that I feel that I need to sensitize not only others, but also myself about a huge world outside my known secure domain. And that is what I try to reach out to. And I had selected certain poems, but when I heard Franklin's poems, I changed my mind and switched on to a poem I wrote long ago, and which is a part of the anthology brought out by Jaideep and Sangeeta. It's called My Best Friends. And for an only child, I suppose the best friends are the parents. And I never looked upon my parents as I grew up as parents. Yes, I detested parental authority, and I saw to it that they became my friends. So this is the poem with which I want to begin. My Best Friends. This afternoon, I wore my dead father's glasses. At once, the world became greener all around. Unheard music spilled and spiraled the intense air. Rhapsody wafted like a healing balm. A bird beaked and bent the cage bars, flew like a bird possessed into the beckoning blue. I watched it soar into the blue field overhead, seeing it truly as I wore my father's glasses. A tinkling of bangles on my left arm, my mother's gold bands clasp me softly. The rich metal, a glittering security, their curled touch on my arm like a circular sigh. Each time I'm gored, I hear the tinkling of my mother's bangles. Each time I fall, my father's glasses put me back on track. Two invisible ventilators, a life support system unmatched. So that's the first one. Thank you. And the second poem is something I wrote recently. I haven't dared to read it anywhere else. So I want to share it with you, and probably you can even comment on it. And it's titled, Do I Write the Poem? Do I write the poem, or does it write itself? The lines trickling, streams churning, depths unknown, unseen. Buds of poems unfurl their petals on the page. The page blossoms, a stabbing pain, a healing touch, a mother's clasp, lost and found among the words that create a shelter as the storms storm through the pages of Brew's time. Do I write the poem? Can I write a poem? The poem writes itself. My fingers on the keyboard hypnotized. The poem dictates. I'm the poem's service provider. I'm the good old poem stenographer. The poem is my analyst. My poem reads me like an open book. So that's. And do we have time for more, Bashidara?
Yeah,
Right.
two more.
All right. Okay. So, and this one is a romantic poem. It's called Rendezvous. Every midnight, I live a little as you appear out of the horizon to hold me in a dream. Every night, sleep seems to be an entry ticket to the boudoir of fantasies. As we hold each other, the grip sways between a clutch and a touch. The embrace of the vibrant unreal enlivens the comatose real. Every midnight I die a little. I stretch my arms and hold each dream, breathless in ecstasy, drunk with the elixir that only dreams can stir. Happiness jerks me out of sleep. Dreams disturbed lie like glass shards underfoot. The dreamless days of day, living death every day. Waiting to wake up in your arms again, my love, when midnight strikes and dreams of you dispel living death. So that's another one. Thank you. Another one?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right. And finally, so after all this is really what I was just referring to. Very recently in the Himalayan region, in a resort, a young woman was just tossed over the bridge and killed because she protested against the resort owner trying to force her into prostitution. So this is the poem, Not a Body. This is also a very new poem, reading it for the first time. If it doesn't work for you, please let me know. Not a Body. And now, at the foothills of the holy Himalayas, abode of goddesses and gods, the teenager who worked for a living floated down the river lifeless, flung off like trash from the bridge, a disobedient body who dared to threaten her corrupt masters. The somebodies demanded surrender, silent obedience, Massage was the password for a domain where somebody's hungered for young bodies, gobbling living bodies like juicy meat, like ripe fruit. Persistent protest of an adamant body, a skilled twist of the jugular vein, a poisoned drink, a knife swipe, or a bullet through the forehead, depending on the mood of that day. And yet in the killing fields, cooled by the salubrious Himalayan breeze of the holy Himalayan heights, fasting rituals erupted for the goddess Durga in 9 avatars. Durga's trident into the heart of dark Asura the demon, Ram's arrows beheading Ravana, the dark demon with human desires. Some held the parents responsible for sending their girl to the den of debauchery, a resort where feasting on young bodies was the peace, the resistance. Docile dolls with luscious bodies, they can't dare, they can't speak, just stuff their bags and mouths with the floating black money. Ankita was neither docile nor silent. The poor, educated girl from the hills faced the demons like a goddess. She was murdered for she dared. She was murdered for little Miss Nobody dared to defy, dared to refuse, dared to speak. Such is the bias of a God-defying world. Hell is empty. All the demons are here. And yet, just a minute, sorry. As voices rise, the cool breeze groans, the river waters flow. For the young girl, just a ripe body to the demons, in life and in death, defiant Ankita, the girl with a mind, yet proved she was somebody. Thank you.
Thank you for those very, very powerful poems, beginning from the image of the bracelet as a sai, and the poem reading us, the poem reading the poet, and concluding with this. It has been a wonderful journey through stories and poetry through your poems. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
And now we move ahead to Dr. Lakshmi Kannan, also known by her Tamil pen name Kaveri. She's a bilingual writer. She was born in Mysore and received her schooling in Bangalore. Her 25 books include poems, novels, short stories, and translations. Her latest translation, Wooden Cow, is a translation of the iconic Tamil writer T. Janakiraman's novel about a renowned and gifted musician's volatile relationship with a fiercely independent dancer. She has been a resident writer for the International Writing Program, Iowa, USA, a Charles Wallace writer at the University of Kent at Canterbury, UK, a British Council visitor, Cambridge, and the Sahitya Akademi writer, a fellow of the Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Shimla. We are very, very grateful, Professor Lakshmi, that you agreed to join us, and we are eagerly looking forward to your beautiful poems. Over to you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Vasudha and JD, for having me over here for what I thought was a very, very interesting opportunity to work out the conflict that I always have when I write a poem, because I wonder if I should be a fiction writer at all, because there is this bit of a story that bulls its way to a poem. And the reverse is also true. And there are some of my less charitable critics of fiction who have commented, if Lakshmi Kannan cannot conclude, she lapses into poetry and just, write something that is poetic. So I seem to be falling inside a crack somewhere, but this is one unusual forum which recognizes we all have a story to tell. So that is so nice that it is accommodating. I'll read two poems. One of them is about the river Sindhu and India. They both have a story to tell. And this poem I acknowledge to Rhetorica Quarterly, which is edited by the poet Ranu Uniyal. And this particular issue is to celebrate the 75 years of India's independence. You birthed a nation, Sindhu. You really did. Like it happens in traditional families, a newborn baby is named after a venerable grandfather, grandmother. That over, the name is never used again. It's just not done. How could you disrespect an elder by calling out his or her name? Only priests are allowed to chant the original name in religious rituals, such as a Yagnupavitam, a wedding, or a shraddh, to continue the thread of lineage. The family gets busy choosing an alternate name that's closest to the original. So Parvati becomes Meenakshi. Ranganayaki turns into Rama. And the imposing Ananta Sayanam morphs into a crisp Narayan. Cool, isn't it? River Sindhu, you were called Indus by the Greeks. From there, you made an easy transition to Indus and birthed a country, India. Yet, in ancient Sanskrit Nadistuti Sukta, you continue to be Sapta Sindhu, straddling the Himalayan realms and South Central Asia. A nation got its name from this mighty river. Would you still say, what's in a name, you dear bard from Avon? The second one is, I acknowledge this to the upcoming anthology edited by Anita Nahal with her team, Soul Spaces, Poems on Cities, Towns and Villages. Again, it's a very, very perceptive kind of a vision behind this whole anthology, because we take a piece of us wherever we go, whichever city we transform, go into a maximum city or a minimum city or a small town or a village or whatever. There is something from our childhood or somewhere. We just take a bit of it. And that is how. So there is a bit of an introduction that this needs. Chamundi Hills is in Mysore. I was born in Mysore and spent the first few years of my childhood there before I went to Bangalore. And the Chamundi Hills is on an elevation of 1,060 meters, on the peak of which there is the Chamundeshwari temple. So I'm reading this poem as, continuing the spirit of the Durga Puja that we just went through, where every year we renew ourselves with this reassuring power of the woman's power to vanquish the Ashura, whether within herself or whether outside. And this is a very, very Indian kind of attitude to female energy. So on the hill is this Chamundeshwari, who is the divine mother Durga or Shakti, and she killed Mahishasura after a fierce battle. Chamundi Hills is in two short sections. Section 1. I was 5. Driving up the Chamundi Hills put me on a picnic mood. Our family cars ascended the curving roads in orderly rows, one following the other, to keep a tab on kids and women. Look there, the statue of Mahishasura. said an uncle, sword in one hand and a cobra in the other. He stared fiercely at us. Terrified, I buried my face in my mother's bosom. Don't be scared, little one. Devi Chamundeshwari will kill him, she assured, hugging me tight. Inside the temple sat the awesome Chamundeshwari Devi, fearless and determined to slay the Ashura. Section 2. Mahishasura has changed a little bit. He has discarded the sword, let the cobra slither away, and now sports an immaculate white Veshti, which is a dhoti, bordered with superior zari. He wears denims too on occasions, or classy sharp suits, trendy glares, polished shoes. His English has an impeccable accent. His Tamil is, oh, so chaste. His behavior, blameless. Yet, he couldn't quite con every woman who came his way. Those who glimpsed the Ashura through the refined veneer became Chamundis, their eternal Guru Ma. Thank you.
Wonderful, 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 Lakshmi Devi.
Thank you.
It's a
Thank you.
beautiful way you actually narrated on Chamunda. That's for every writing there is a story. Recently, I was reading. For every writing, there is a story behind every writing. So that is quite amazing.
Yes,
Thank you
yes.
so much.
Sometimes the narrative catches up, the narrative style, and it
Absolutely.
lets you unfold a story. And you're one of the few unusual ones to accommodate it. A poem that I used to read.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much. It was really powerful.
You're most
And we
welcome. My
move on
pleasure.
to Kerry
My pleasure.
Shawn. Who is like many others in the panel today, as a translator of great reputation. He's a citizen of the United States of America and Lithuania. The fountain of Kerry's poetry is in the urban America, India, Brazil, and Lithuania. But the roots go worldwide. From 1998 to 2000, he taught translation theory and creative composition as a Fulbright associate professor at Vilnius University. He has dozens of books to his credit, and he needs no introduction as a poet. He also translates from Portuguese. He is the Republic of UCP's World Poetry Ambassador and a prolific writer. Over to Kerry. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaideep, and thanks for inviting me. It's a real pleasure. When I noticed that most of the participants would be Indian or from India, I decided to read two poems in that context. And just to give you a little background before I come to the Indian poems, I was, as a young lad, 19, 20, 21, I lived in Devarakonda in Telangana, working in a nutrition program for young children and pregnant women. It was 2 years it overlapped. And I kept a lot of notes on that. And later, I did a book of polyphonic, a kind of an epic, about 200 and some page book that P. Lau published in Calcutta. That was later a Gathering of Smoke. It was, of course, totally ignored. And then it was published in Three Continents Press in DC that was publishing a lot of that. But first I will read, I'm in Lithuania. And when I lived in America, I lived near 3 Mile Island, where there was a nuclear or atomic plant that almost melted down. And I was there when that happened. And right now I live near Ukraine. And when Chernobyl went, the radiation came into Lithuania and went up to Finland and all over. And we are now living in constant fear. My first poem, this was written a long time ago. It's called Chernobyl, and it comes from that time. Wind exterminates the air. In Finland, reindeer are banned from the major scene. Vodka freezes in the liver, sending shivers of radiation down the spine. Clouds are thick with DDT and isotopes with the half-life of eternity. O Demeter, in every grain of wheat an ocean of bloated birds, mushroom puree for the babies of the world. An astronomer mistakes a cormorant for an angel as it dries its wings in the falling light. Black market lumber glows like foxfire. O dark prince, in league with the invisible worm, a child with a hummingbird for a nose stares at the lampshade, waiting for the sun to rise. When the war, I don't think the invasion became into Ukraine. Of course, we are right there, and we are helping Ukraine as much as we can. But there's a lot of fear. I have 16-year-old twins, and live in an old place in what was the former Jewish ghetto. We put a bomb. We had a 2 meter. It's a small 2 meter by 2 meter cell in the cellar of this 1868 house. So we kind of just stored it like a bomb shelter, which it is still, and put a lot of water and canned goods down there. And so this is a poem called Bomb Shelter. The whites of my eyes synthesizing the fluttering cobwebs enveloping the smoke-blackened ceiling and rubble of the makeshift 2 meter by 2 meter bomb shelter in the building's ancient cellar. A rare claustrophobic moment reruns in a phantasm of overhanging Spanish moss-like lichen lassos of filigree dangling, brushing my head, penetrating the frightened lobe of my brain with an almost craven, tender touch of something totally alien, but too close to my helpless imagination for comfort as I feel your hair sweeping over my corpse. Now I will go to the Indian. I've written so much, that long book and then many other poems. I worked mainly with Lambadis, which are Banjaris, I guess, in the more national word, but the local Lambadi tribe. And they have what is called tundas. And so their greeting is, of course, Ram Ram. And this is called the Red Turban. I used to spend a lot of time there. I was 20 years old, so you imagine this. I kept a lot of notes, huge notebooks, which back at the University of Pennsylvania, where I had been a student, had a huge Indian subcontinent language and history library. And so I converted the notes at the time. The Red Turban. In the village of Indian gypsies late at night, with the fire almost eaten by the ground, Rama stirring the ashes, the whole scene world dying down into the sound of fire-stretched drums. An orchestra of pots and pans, stick dance and harvest dance, with stars and goats and children watching us. You took off my red turban and spread it on the sandy humus of powdered dung. This is my bed, made for me by what still is spared for beauty. Then the men and women gathered round and sang one last song before the village mutt lay down at my side. and you, Runki, shied away into your father's hut. Just like the moon we upbraided for turning in too early behind the ridge that soon covered it with a braid of thorns. I kept a lot of notes, as I said. I only been back to India once at the invitation of Namdeo Dasal about 12 years ago in Mumbai before he died. Maybe you know of Dasal's work with the Dalits and the Indian Panthers. And then I went to Delhi and read Ashok, and Mangalish Dabra, who is also now deceased, invited me to read in Delhi at that time. I kept notes, and I went on. I was mostly in Andhra, but I did travel around a little bit. I was working; I didn't have much time, and I wanted to see everything. And I went with a friend, and we were in Calcutta at the time. We called it Calcutta, and I went to see a brothel. I did not go in the brothel just to take notes, and this is about this really sick-looking woman. I gave her the name Ginger. So Ginger willingly fills up the bottle and turns into a silver dance, where shoes are so delicate they trip over the smallest speck of dust. The garnet in the ring is the color of the fragrance of the perfume worn by your mother on her way to market with a wicker basket. You walk in the middle of the road and divide the division of the polar opposites into that infinite moment when moon and sun no longer cast a shadow. I saw you in a brothel in Calcutta. Your skin was as white as this paper, your face flaked as an ancient fresco. Your bones must be this boat of tortoiseshell. All these lines have been heaped up for you. And one more poem from India, and then I'll finish with a poem from this area if I have time. This is called The Kitchen. And I also was quite friendly. I was working in a block office on the nutrition program on loan. And I had a friend, a shepherdess, who was a secret girlfriend, also had to be secret in a small town later. I was young. She was a couple years older. She had been thrown out by her husband for not having children. She had married when she was 12. When she was 16, she had broken her bangles, of course, and she was taken in by a local ready landlord who had about, I think, dozens of concubines all over the area, didn't live there. But they lived in one, she lived with her aunts and with rock cutters, they were shepherds, buffalo, in one hut. And they cooked inside, as you may know, in some of these places. There was no chimney or anything, and a lot of smoke inside the hut. And a lot of these people lost their eyesight, kind of went blind at an early age because of this smoke. It's called The Kitchen. Here, where food is prepared for hungry men and hungry gods, the earth exists in a windowless world. Without chimney, brown mud and clay make the room almost airtight. What little light there is sprinkles out from the cook fire and in through the cracks in the roofing straw. The reddest of peppers, the henna and cracked lips are colorless here. The woman cooking is almost blind from the smoke. Her skin is the color of curry. What does she care? Her skin is also shoe leather. Her hair is as gray as the ashes she stirs. A gray mist pulls a curtain across the door. Her daughters powder their faces. They have sons. Their hair is slick with coconut oil. They toil elsewhere in their husbands' beds. The cow dung comes like manna from heaven. The words of the priests tell her her fire is for food. Nothing she has ever said has ever been heard by anyone but her daughters. One by one, they will follow in her steps to the kitchen. And Jaydeep, I have time for one more here.
Yeah,
I'd like-
sure. Yeah.
Okay, this is in Vilnius, looking out from a balcony. I'm in what they call Litvaks, or in the old Jewish area. All the Jews were killed, like 40,000 of them during the war. And I'm looking out at the chimneys and the smoke coming up from some of the apartments. And of course, I'm thinking of Auschwitz and stuff, but here I am looking out. There's a couple words in here I probably won't need to explain. D-books are spirits that come back to haunt. The Jewish spirits will come back. And one other word, Athens of the North, is because this was a center of Jewish learning. So it's called Athens of the North, looking out. The outside north looking in, that expanse of light filling my eyes and the room. An ideal light, I'm told, for making images of the world. That may be. There is nothing painterly about me. Instead, I stand here in this script, looking out at the Athens of the North, the chimney tops and bricks, the smoke, the bone ash pastel of ducks, dust's nondescript brushstroke. The faucet drips haphazardly. Stray tomcat spray marks the entranceway, so that nowadays the angel of death stays away, as do the seraphim and Purim puppet plays. Evening's getting dark now, and my hungry eye barely makes out the drab zodiacs of antennae. The moon sets to the side of the frame, felt but unseen. Planets are playing charades as satellite discs, barely audible. Dirges and D-books hum in the shoal of the urban buzz of time and space and emptiness. And I listen as best I can, locked inside myself, unknowable, smoldering, motionless, looking out. Thank you. Thank you, Jaydeep. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much for those very, very beautiful poems from India, especially. And of course, there were a lot of stories in them, and we look forward to more Indian stories circulating in the world. I would now like to invite Anita Nahal. Anita Nahal is an Indian-American poet, professor, flash fictionist, and children's writer. She has 3 books of poetry, 1 of flash fictions, 4 for children, and 4 edited anthologies to her credit. Her 3rd poetry book, What's Wrong with Us Kali Women, has been prescribed as compulsory reading in an elective course on multicultural society at Utrecht University in the Netherlands, and was nominated as the best poetry book for British Arts Notoria. Anita teaches at the University of the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. We are very, very grateful that you consented to join us this evening, and we look forward to your poems. Also, the ekphrastic poems which you intend to read, you had sent us the images in advance, and do let me know which image you want me to share, and I would share that on my screen. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Vasudhara, Jaydeep. It's always a pleasure to be in any event organized by you, because you're so thorough, so meticulous, and so kind. I love listening to everyone, and Franklin, beginning with your, I like the words you use, story poem, because I write prose poems, and they, and then everyone added on to that. We all have stories to tell, and I was listening very keenly because I thought, like Sanjukta, I thought maybe I should change a poem, something else I should read, but I'm sticking to 2 poems. I'm going to read only 2, so that we don't spend too much time. And they are from this book, which is yet to be officially released. This is my 4th book, which has just come out. It's called Kisses at the Espresso Bar. Thank you. And each poem here is accompanied by, it's a book of acrophistic poems. So there's an image on each page and the poem on the other side. So I requested 7 artists that I came to know through Facebook and otherwise, and I requested them for their images of their artwork. Some are sculpturists, some draw with pencil, graphite pencil, some are quilt makers. So I requested them all to have their images in the book. I mean, I wrote poems on them. And so it's not necessary that the poem matches exactly with the image, but that's my interpretation. The first poem that I wanted to read, Vasudhara, if you can pull up the one, which is this image, No Clean Slate with Blood. And this image that the first poem is linked with is by a Canadian mixed media artist. Her name is Loretta Newjack. Thank you. I also kept getting logged off. So if I do, I alerted Vasudhara to it, but she said, we'll wait for you to log back. So please be patient on that. I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm being logged off. No Clean Slate with Blood. And this poem is about the day Kabul fell in Afghanistan. And we saw images of people falling from planes, rushing to get onto planes. And in each of my poems, especially in this book, I have utilized some cultural artifact. I have spoken about movies or writers. So the one word that I wanted to talk to you about was The Matrix, which was actually a movie, a 1999 science fiction movie. So I made a mention of that in this poem, and I also made a mention of Jurassic Park, which was, of course, the first movie came out in 1993. No Clean Slate with Blood. Let us start on a clean slate. A clean slate it will be. Will it? For whom? Victors, losers, departers, anglers. Jigsaw puzzle of spoils remains incomplete. Truth, dare, brickmanship, all consummating. Horrific orgy of breaths and breathing. Life, death exhumed. Everyone is scattering us. Our emotions, beliefs, roots, bones, blood, longings, belongings, family, friends, futures. Petitions gone into hiding, or lost, or bonfired, pushing, stampeding, wedging, transporting, not knowing where we are going. Knowing only we are grabbing something that smells of freedom. What will I write when the slate has been washed, blood mopped, tears dried? When screams and pleas have been choke-held, drowned, will I feel like writing then? With my innocent children muffled? With my parents left standing on a frenzied tarmac as plane doors padlocked? I was the last allowed to board, huddled, maskless, next to strangers. My heart served on a privileged platter I did not bake, which was still pulsating like fish out the water. I realize now why I don't eat seafood. Crabs and lobsters thrown alive in boiling water, with their stalks watching intently, petrified, yet proud, with claw thumbs straight up, screaming at top of their dwindling lungs. I give a damn. Karma doesn't take too long. My identity, your world, my world, moving in different speeds, directions, fissures. The matrix was on replay. Dystopia, he was dragging utopia, she, by her hair. Primitive societies were returning, hatched in laboratories of the gluttonous in many Jurassic Parks. And then there was a union, a marriage of senseless squabbles of mice and men. We became a speck on the messy roll of the film for the nightly news. Thank you. The second poem I would like to read is Have and Have Nots. This image, Vasudhara. If it's not pulling up, don't worry about it.
Just give me a second, it should work.
Okay, I mean, I can show the image. This is by an African-American artist, and he's a visual and mixed media artist, Michael D. Harris, who lives in
Maybe you can
Georgia.
start reading, and in the meantime, I'll just
Sure,
listen.
sure. So he's a poet and an artist, and this is a poem on that image. This is the image. And the poem is called Have and Have-Nots. I made a mention of in this poem to Slumdog Millionaire, which was a film made in 2008. Also made a mention of Alaknanda and Bhagirathi rivers in Devprag, India, and the Ohio and Mississippi rivers in Cairo, Illinois. There's also a reference to Harriet, who is Harriet Tubman, who was one of the main leaders of the underground railroad network just before the American Civil War. And she ultimately freed hundreds of slaves from slavery and helped them to reach north. So the poem is called Haves and Have-Nots, and it's really about class struggle and poverty and classism. Remember Slumdog Millionaire? That was just a movie. There is something infuriating in a group of nobles attempting peace for those who don't have food or water or clothes or a roof or a covered toilet. Aristocrats scoff at those reeking, pinching their noses, tossing fetid shoes into a bonfire of the indulgent. They keep rambling and advancing. Have-nots look hungrily at leftovers, wipe nose grunges off, stand static for hours, and leave their one set of clothing out every night, hoping it might rain. The whims of the haves, the needs of the have-nots. No just thoughts merging at the confluence of Alaknanda and Bhagirathi or the Ohio and the Mississippi. Different strokes for different folks. The snake is flushed, 1/4 of the moon is a bride, the whale is polka dotted, my chair is regal, I sewed my own gown, I see Harriet and others singing coded spirituals. Felled trees float upstream, Mercury is a fire burning in frozen Jupiter, and then the solitary dove in the harem of the haves is cuddled, petted, passed from one perfumed bosom to another before they decide to let it fly, let it be free. Other unlike birds watch intently as peace is a name given to one of their step kind. Any bird can be eaten on costly chinaware with fuddy-duddy sprinkling of seasoning. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you for those very, very beautiful poems. And with this, we come to the conclusion of what has been a very, very memorable session of poetry and story put together. Lakshmi Kannan said a while ago that this theme gave her an opportunity to understand how narrative and poetry intersect in her own writings. And I believe that even when Sanjuktadas Gupta said that ultimately it is the poem who is reading the poet, we are talking about that. And this is similar to what Sukrita Paul Kumar also mentioned when she said that the story and the narrative is already being reshaped in the telling. So the story that is heard, and then it is experienced, and then when it is written. So every retelling is another narrativizing, and every narrativizing is perhaps a fresh narrative. And that is how we move. We are very, very grateful to all of you for sharing your very beautiful stories with us, stories that will hopefully stay in our hearts and germinate into more stories and more poems. Thank you very much for this very, very warm and very fertile session of storytelling and poetry. It has been beautiful to come together as part of the Hearth Within, and we hope that we can keep coming together to celebrate poetry regularly. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
For this wonderful opportunity. It's so good to hear poems from